I think people maybe have the misunderstanding that when they get sober, when you find abstinence, life's going to work out and it's just great. And isn't that wonderful? And of course, that is wonderful. It's a wonderful start, but it's important to understand that's like putting you in the pole position to be able to do certain things. Do you see it that way?
Yeah, I really had that. There was like a common sense genius to 12-step programs. You put the plug in the jug and then you have a kind of a fighting chance to sort things out. But sorting things out will be the rest of your life. It'll be a life's work. A day of sobriety was what was being promised, and then what you do with that day is up to you.
Mm.
I also think I was being equipped with an intensely sane life stance. There's honesty, open-mindedness, and willingness was like the how of recovery in a 12-step program. Was just really sane. And then think about that. That was like our whole plan in life. It's like, okay, I'm going to be honest, I'm going to be open-minded, and I'm going to be willing. I think you're pointing in the right direction at that point. And then when someone sincerely tries to help you, like my meditation teachers or my yoga teachers, they're meeting someone who's being honest, who's being open and being willing. It's a good combination. You have the right teachers at the right time and you have the right attitude in the student, and good things are going to happen.
Welcome to the Recovery 2.0 Life Beyond Addiction Conference. I am your host, Tommy Rosen, and today I have the great pleasure of connecting with my dear friend, Rolf Gates. Rolf is the author of Daily Reflections on Addiction, Yoga, and Getting Well, as well as the best-selling Meditations from the Mat, Daily Reflections on the Path of Yoga, and Meditations on Intention and Being, Daily Reflections on the Path of Yoga, Mindfulness, and Compassion. He is a leading voice in contemporary yoga, and his work is used as a resource for yoga students and teachers worldwide. He conducts vinyasa intensives, 200 and 300-hour teacher trainings internationally. Rolf is a former U.S. Army Ranger and social worker, specializing in addiction. He brings his eclectic background to his teaching and life. His work has been featured on television and in print, including Yoga Journal, People Magazine, and Travel and Leisure. His first children's book, Yoga Friend, a Pose-by-Pose Partner Yoga Adventure, was published in 2018. Rolf is a graduate, lead faculty, and director of the Kripalu School of Yoga. Rolf, thank you so much for joining me today. I'm so grateful.
Oh, it's wonderful to be here, Tommy. Thank you for having me.
So Rolf, you and I we have done 10 interviews over the years, and we've known each other and we've taught alongside each other for many years. And I wanted to give you sort of a context of what brings us together now and what's a little bit different than some of the things we've done before. This is the Life Beyond Addiction Conference, and I've decided to focus on this, in a sense, the next stage, if you will, of recovery, because I see so many people struggling in recovery, not just struggling in addiction, as we all know that's a struggle, but also struggling on this path of recovery. And so I wanted to focus these conversations helping people to answer the question, what next? What now? I'm sober. I have the abstinence piece, but I'm still struggling in my life in so many ways. And so I'm just very excited to have this conversation with you from the yoga and meditation perspective, which is where you have spent so many decades and days, weeks, months, and years helping people move themselves along a evolutionary path. So that's sort of the framing for today. So can we jump in sort of there?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. So with regards to the life path of yoga and how that intertwines with the path of recovery from addiction, can you speak a little bit about how you've seen that in your personal journey and in the journey that you help other people to have as well?
Well, yeah, I mean, I'll just start with just my own experience. There was a tremendous heart component in my early recovery. So I went to rehab, and it was really the connections I made with the people in rehab and then the connections I made with people in 12-step programs that kind of fired me up and motivated me to stay sober, to get sober, stay sober. And so there was just a bunch of people who were there for me. And it was kind of the energy of loving kindness was kind of the first, say, 5 years of my recovery. And it was very, it was galvanizing to be in these relationships that were so sincere and honest and effective, in keeping, I got sober and stayed sober as a result of these relationships that I was forming in 12-step programs, my sponsor, friend, sober friends, sober roommates, and what have you, sober community. And I didn't know I needed more. I just ended up going to Kripalu for kind of like a sober vacation with at that time it was my fiance, who's now been my wife for 26 years. And after my first yoga class, I began I didn't realize it, but I began the physical recovery from trauma. There was a tremendous, there's a phrase in bodywork called cringing patterns, where like something you kind of cringe away from gets stuck in your connective tissue. And I had like think of the pain of the world in the 60s and 70s. That was all my body. The pain of race in America, the pain of gender, right, et cetera, et cetera. My ancestral traumas, like my parents lived through the Depression, World War II, Korean War, Vietnam War, and just the struggle that people were having at the time. I mean, people are having a lot of struggle today as well, but that as a child, I think we're very impressionable. So, all that stuff got stuck in my body, and the yoga poses and the breath work were a way to begin unraveling my past from my being in a way that sobriety had been a superb way to stop harming myself, but it wasn't sufficient in terms of that unraveling process. Picture your body holding on to stuff and then slowly releasing it. And so I started with the poses at Kripalu, and I've been doing a pretty much 5-day-a-week yoga practice since 1996. And then about 7 years later, my daughter was born, and I began a committed meditation practice as a way to kind of support the adjustment into being a parent. That was a big change of pace, and I needed. I mean, all of this is like kind of like good fortune. It was like my good fortune to have a 12-step program when I needed it. It was my good fortune to have yoga when I was ready for it. It was my good fortune to have superb meditation training when I needed it. And so at each point in my life, I've had the support from other humans that I needed to continue to grow as a human being.
You were open to that support at each step of the way. I mean, there's something profound that you said. I don't hear from too many parents. Well, I had my first child, and so I really wanted to dig into a meditation practice so I could prepare myself for that journey. I mean, that's an extraordinary thing you said.
Well, yeah. I mean, it wasn't. I mean, I think people in recovery can identify with the fact that the heavenly messengers, as the Buddhists call it, the heavenly messengers, which is like, it's that cop who pulls you over for the 9th time. Those are the heavenly messengers. So in each step of the way, they were like heavenly messengers. I couldn't really, my trauma reactions before coming to yoga were just overwhelming in some ways. Like I would get a parking ticket and just lose my mind. And so the piece I got from the poses was in contrast to the heavenly messengers of post-traumatic stress, right? And so the same is true for my meditation. I want to take in your compliment, but I also want to say that I had no idea how to be a parent, and there was enormous suffering around that, and that made me open to meditation. Does that make sense? I had enormous suffering around trauma. That made me open to yoga. I had enormous suffering around drinking. That made me open to 12-step programs. So there was a lot of suffering that preceded that open-mindedness.
Yes. I certainly appreciate your candor and humility in saying that. And as I reflect upon my own evolution at every turn, at every choice to try to do something, it was very often for me in recovery to try to solve for some kind of incredible suffering that I was experiencing
Mm.
existentially. I really, really want to underline that for people. I think people maybe have the misunderstanding that when they get sober, you know, when you find abstinence, life's going to work out and it's just great. And isn't that wonderful? And of course that is wonderful. And it's a wonderful start. But it's important to understand that that's sort of like putting you in the pole position to be able to do certain things. Do you see it that way?
Yeah, I mean, I had that sense that, and also I really had that there was like a common sense genius to 12-step programs, which is like you put the plug in the jug and then you have a kind of a fighting chance to sort things out. But sorting things out will be the rest of your life. It'll be a life's work. It wasn't like, yeah. And so I do think that that was what was being promised.
Mm,
A day of sobriety was what was being promised, and then what you do with that day is up to you.
mm,
I also think I was being equipped with an intensely sane life stance. The life stance that I was being taught. There's honesty, open-mindedness, and willingness was like the how of recovery in a 12-step program. Was this really sane? And think about that. If like that was like our whole plan in life, it's like, okay, I'm gonna be honest, I'm gonna be open-minded, and I'm gonna be willing. I think you're pointing in the right direction at that point. And then when someone sincerely tries to help you, like my meditation teachers or my yoga teachers, they're meeting someone who's being honest, who's being open and being willing. It's a good combination. You have the right teachers at the right time, and you have the right attitude in the student, and good things are gonna happen.
yes.
And
When
I just want to say too that was being modeled for me. Like I was 26 years old when I got sober, and what was being modeled for me in the 12-step community was people who were living that way. It wasn't like they were just talking that way; they were living that way.
mm, well, that's an unbelievably fortunate group of people, group of peers to be around,
Mm.
uh, who are driving you forward. And it speaks, of course, to the power of community, which we'll speak about today for sure. But I want to sort of key into the physical, mental, and emotional and spiritual experience that one starts to have in at least in the beginnings of this practice, the physical practice of yoga, which I think for most people, not everyone, of course, but in the Western world, for most people, the life path of yoga starts in a very physical way. And so as you're, speaking about the PTSD that you've experienced, you've taken on the challenge and the inheritance of this culture and of course of your family. What happens as a person begins to really dedicate themselves to a steady practice of the physical practice of yoga?
I mean, I think that there's a lot of different ways to look at it. One is just through the lens of emotional intelligence, right? And then another is through the lens of neuroplasticity, how the mind can change the activity and structure of the brain. And so you're practicing self-awareness, and then all of the cueing coming from your teachers, for the most part, is teaching you so self-awareness is as I understand it, is the first. There's 4 quadrants to emotional intelligence, and so self-awareness is the first, and then there's this self-management or self-balancing, which is the second. And all of what you're doing in a yoga pose is you're cultivating self-awareness, and then you're finding kind of balance, mental, emotional, and physical well-being within that pose. And so that's like straight up emotional intelligence training. And what it afforded me was the ability, the next 2 is like situational awareness and relationship awareness, essentially, that it afforded me the ability to make better choices in my life as I trained myself in self-awareness and self-balancing. I started making choices that were more consistent with what was true for me. I was developing the habit of, initially I'm listening inwardly for tension and learning to release physical tension. And then later on, I'm like listening inwardly as I'm eating to know when I'm full. I'm listening inwardly to know when I'm not in a good state to be in a conversation with my boss. And so there's all of this training for self-awareness that you're getting in these poses from day one. And I think in terms of answering your question, the first thing I learned was how to to soften out of the habitual tension my body was constantly carrying.
Mm.
I was ready to like fight at a moment's notice. I was ready to defend myself at a moment's notice, and that's like hard on the body. And I started to like become self-aware and notice that I was holding tension and be able to release it. And that was like lights were turning on. That was a whole new way of life. The only way I had known how to relieve any tension from my body up to that point was using. When that was done, it was like sugar, caffeine, and exercise were the only things that I could use to like change, to regulate myself.
Mm.
And now I was learning how to bring awareness to a part of my body, feel a tension, and soften. So I'd say that was the first thing.
Yes. And as a person goes down that path, I'm making again a general statement, but I'm seeing across the last 3 decades of practice, people move from this very physical approach, and it becomes more subtle, almost for all of us. Like, I mean, naturally, first of all, the body is aging, but it's more than that. There's a deepening. There's a deepening, and there's this move towards the embracing of the development of the meditative process and the meditative mind and the meditative approach to life. And I know that that's been very profound for you. In fact, I could just sort of look at the 3 books you've written, or the three yoga meditation books you've written, not the child's book, although that actually fits into what I'm about to say. And I could follow in a little bit in your progression from gross to subtle, to more and more depth. And I was wondering if you would speak to that deepening experience, because this is really getting into the topic of life beyond addiction on a one day at a time basis.
Right. I mean, I think you can, that's a big question. I think that I was inspired from kind of day one of my recovery to living a life of meaning, and that meaning being derived from the kind of kindness and love you can kind of bring into the world one day at a time. I felt like I was pointed in that direction by my 12-step community, that like really, you get like sobriety is a free gift, and then what do you want to do with it? And so I had this desire, but then I didn't have a capacity. And so in some ways, yoga opened up this whole new world where I could kind of start to take care of myself while trying to serve others, which was like a new thing. I was just like, okay, I'm in my like late 20s. I'm just going to serve others, and I'm not going to really take care of myself in any way besides not drinking. And yoga kind of introduced this idea that like maybe you could kind of include yourself in this circle of compassion that you're developing. And so
Good
I started
idea.
like, okay, I'm going to start doing my yoga in the morning, and Deepak Chopra's 7 Spiritual Laws of Success clued me into meditation. So I was like doing this yoga and meditation in the morning, and it was like calming me down and giving me a connection to some kind of deeper dimension to life. It's hard to, I would just kind of connect to that deeper source energy through yoga and meditation, and then go out and do my thing. But I still didn't have a lot of what we call mindfulness. The ability to kind of watch the mind. There's a phrase, to reflect on the mind as opposed to react from it. So I spent a good maybe 6-7 years doing the poses for kind of physical and emotional regulation, but without the mental training of mindfulness. So I still was really caught up in my beliefs and patterns. And there's a phrase from my family growing up, which "you pissed me off." And you can just look at the phrase like that, "you're pissing me off," and just see the absence of mindfulness, right? But it's like, yeah, I have no agency in the way I'm responding to a situation, and I have no self-awareness. And so I would say that in the same way that the poses gave me agency around my physical and emotional status, the cultivation of the mind training of meditation gave me ability to be self-aware of how my mind was assessing a situation or a relationship. I could introduce my values and principles into the equation instead of just reacting to a situation. I could pause and what have I known to be true in the past? What is my purpose here? What are my values here? What do I believe in terms of this person in front of me? What do they, what is my heart's desire? All of that started to become available to me before I would make a choice. I think the tragedies of my early recovery was my heart was in the right place, but my head was in the past. I was still making choices based on the old scripts or identities and belief systems. And with each passing year, there's a phrase that came out of the training I just led. This wonderful guy named Charles talked about. We're learning how to create space for something new to grow. And the yoga kind of allowed my physical body and my emotional body and it creates some space for new things to happen at that level. And then meditation was a way to create space for something new to grow around how I processed myself and others and how I arrived at a choice. That is just a beautiful thing for a sober person to find, because we realize that how we're living matters to us. I think one of the tragedies of active addiction is you just don't think it matters. How I'm living or the impact I'm having on the world it just doesn't matter. And then sobriety is walking through that and coming to a new decision.
And there's also compounded by the fact that in active addiction, at least temporarily, one has given up the power of choice. And that's being restored through practice and through this thing called recovery. So as you have gone down your path, I was wondering if you could speak a little bit about mindfulness, some of the basic tenets of it, because really, I think already in a very short period of time, the things that you've said are very, very important as part of a person's journey. Even if their path is not necessarily yoga and meditation, what you've said really hits home on the importance of these practices and the why of it. So maybe we could get a little bit down to the how of it, because people are going to want to know. Of course, they can take a training with you, and they should. Highly recommend it. They can come and be a part of Recovery 2.0, and they should highly recommend it. And they can speak with other teachers, and people can guide us forward. I'd really like to get your thoughts from the land of mindfulness as they're revealing themselves to you today.
Yeah, well, I went to, there's two websites that I trained at. There's a place called dharma.org is Insight Meditation, and it's in Massachusetts. And then spiritrock.org is the same organization in California. It's where I now teach, but I also practice. And so these are settings where you're surrounded by other people learning to meditate, and you've got teachers who are sincere in their desire to teach meditation, and to the point of the teachers at both these places teach only for donation. It's a donation only setting. And in this kind of sincerity, very similar to a 12-step program, the first thing I learned was how to sit still. And that probably took like 3 or 4 years, like how to sit still without the conditioning in my being. There's wanting, there's not wanting, there's restlessness, there's doubt. These things just like coursing through my being. So just being able to sit still is this enormous retraining of the central nervous system, the connective tissues of the entire physiology of your body changes as you learn to, instead of reacting to tension, learning how to release it without changing the posture. Imagine the metaphor there, that you can stay in the posture without reacting, but just noticing what's arising and letting it pass, So that's just a piece of work there. You become a different person if you can be in a situation without reacting to it, fully present for it, but not learning from it, but not reacting to it. That's kind of, my the compulsive reactivity of my addicty self, when I shut up, was very high.
Mm.
And to be able to delay gratification, to cultivate impulse control, like these are huge things for a recovering person. And so that was the first level, is just learning how to sit still and breathe and use the training of the yoga postures to learn how to be a little more subtle in my body, learn the training of the yoga breath, use the breath to support me,
Mm.
and just be someone who can sit still and be present. And like to cultivate, you're not just being still and not reacting, but you're being still and not reacting to be more present for what's happening,
Mm.
what's actually truly happening internally and externally. I think as that started to kick in, and I had, there was a lot of commitment to just that. It's kind of like step one, is sitting still. And from there, there's that dawning capacity to learn the teachings of mindfulness and to examine them, and to spend, in my case, it was a lot of years. Like I'll give you an example of what I was learning. So there's three forms of suffering. There's thinking the impermanent is permanent, thinking the unreliable is reliable, and thinking that which is not the self is the self. And so once I've learned to sit still, I can watch myself react to something that's impermanent like it's permanent, and just be like, that's that. That thing they were teaching you, you're doing it right now. And if you're still, you can kind of feel, oh, I'm doing it. I'm relating to the impermanent like it's permanent. What would happen if I chilled out a little bit and just saw that this is a moment in time, and so that's like the integration of the teachings. First, I need to be able to sit still, and then I could just watch internally to see if the teachings are accurate. Like being the unreliability piece is like, expecting the same result. It's like I go to this restaurant and it's great. The next time I go, it's not great. It's something I thought was reliable isn't reliable, and just, oh, that's that thing. I'm doing that thing. I'm pissed off because the world, like things that aren't reliable, I expect to be reliable. The last one is, oh, I'm doing that thing. It's like I had this much money in the account, and so I was like this person. Now I have this much money in the account, and I had made a self out of my bank account, or I'd made a self out of my relationship or my career, or the way people were like responding to me. And now I'm suffering because that self is vanishing.
Mm.
And so, this is the slow integration of the teachings. And so I think there's a lot of work that I had to do to become available to the teachings. And then there was the willingness to really go through the process of kind of study and application that first stage allows for. If you can sit still and be present for what's going on, you can start learning more rapidly.
Mm. So I want to touch upon a topic that I probably have avoided this topic. I probably have avoided asking anybody about this topic until this moment, because I have a fear that people watching this are going to get turned off because I'm asking this question.
Okay.
That's my fear. So the question is, or the investigation is, it appears, Rolf, that this doesn't happen quickly. It appears that this requires some steadiness. A lot of people who have struggled with addiction don't feel like they're capable of steadiness, don't feel like they're capable of consistency or seeing things through. And so this is sort of that rub, like, yes, there's an unbelievable thing waiting for you in life beyond addiction, or presence, or mindfulness. And there's also something that has to happen. It's called work, steadiness, consistency. Like, so could we address this very painful topic, for people?
Yeah, I mean, there's two levels, two sources of support. One is if you go to a 12-step program, you have your year, right, of sobriety, whatever, and you're looking at someone, getting his 10-year medallion, you know? And so right there, to me, you have being modeled the idea that something is worth working towards, and that's okay, that you can win, you can get your 2-year medallion, and you get your 3-year medallion, and you can, it's okay to gradually work towards something and to have hope for the future and for yourself. Work towards something and have hope. There's a phrase in yoga, is vara pranidhana, and that's to have faith in that you can achieve a state that you have not yet achieved. To have faith that you can achieve a state that you have not yet achieved. So when I'm looking at someone with 10 years and I'm 1 year sober, believe me, I'm thinking about this one guy. He was an artist who lived in the Cape, Bill. And he was so much more together than I was. He was his clothes were clean. He had a nice winter jacket. I'm living in Boston, and this guy had the ideal winter jacket. This is a state that I had not yet achieved, living in frozen north. But I had faith that if I put, the days together, I could have a life like Bill's, And that same faith is necessary. I go into the meditation community, and I could completely understand what was being offered, much like that 10-year medallion is being offered in a 12-step program. Having self-awareness and self-compassion, having the ability to stay connected to what's happening, have that concentration, but also have that kind of steadiness that you're talking about. I understood that was available. But that I'd have to do a certain amount of work to get there, and I would never understand how much work it was going to be, But just have faith in the process. And so I think I started serious meditation training in 2006. Now it's 2024, and I can say that there were milestones along the way, but I just remember 2006, 2007. I'm starting to meditate every day. I'm starting to go on retreats regularly, and I just knew that I was on the right path. And that the efforts because of the sobriety modeling that had happened already, I knew that mindfulness learning curve would affect positive change in myself eventually. So that's the rub right there, is can you be around people who inspire that faith in yourself in the process?
Examples of victory. Necessary. So this is hitting on the importance of community. Has your community, as you've sort of gone through these last 18 years at least, has that changed a lot? The people that you're around?
Not really. I think that there's something about spiritual community that, at its heart, humanity has this tremendous capacity. What the media seems to completely their conviction is that human self-destruction sells. And so they're just going to pump that out as hard as they can. But there's just a lot of other potential in the human race. And one of it is the spiritual communities that just collectively revere the grace and genius of being human. And so there's this reverence for being human in a 12-step program. And my meditation communities, when we gather, there's this deep and abiding appreciation for our ancestors, for the people who came before us and what they were able to achieve and what they left behind. And then there's the genius that's being born in the very moment that we're in together. And this is the juice of coming together, is that you're not just celebrating what has come before you, but you're celebrating what's being born right now together. And to participate in that is priceless. Every single time I show up to spiritual community, I know I'm right where I want to be. I'm in the right place at the right time.
The teachings of Buddha include this beautiful teaching of the three jewels: the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. And we've spoken a little bit about the Sangha right here, the importance of community and spiritual community and examples of victory. And I was wondering if you wouldn't mind if you speak about the importance of having a teacher um, like a teacher for periods of time in your life that you can learn from? How important has that been for you along this journey?
Yeah, well, the phrase taking refuge in the Buddha is kind of like so many things. It has really more than one meaning. The first is you're taking refuge in the part of yourself that's already awake. And so you are the Buddha, right? You're taking refuge in that. I think the second is the obvious um, value that is derived from being with someone who's accomplished what you're hoping to achieve. You see it like I'm a big sports fan, and so like in my sport, wrestling, the best coach in college wrestling was the best wrestler in college wrestling. And so he opened the door, Cale Sanderson, to like countless others. And so there's something about learning from someone who doesn't, who's not, who ha- it's gone be there's there's conceptual knowledge, and then there's lived experience, and there's two vastly different things. And to have a mentor who has lived experience is priceless.
Mm.
And so you're taking refuge in both the fact that you are that potential in the world, you are the Buddha, but you're also taking refuge in the living presence of someone who's accomplished what you're hoping to accomplish.
And then the second tenet there, Dharma. How are you looking at that through your lens of mindfulness?
Once again, so you're taking refuge in the part of yourself that's already awake, but you're also taking refuge in the truth that you're seeking is present. So the Dharma, one way to look at it is that you don't have to, the truth that you're seeking isn't showing up tomorrow. It's in your lived experience now. And wakefulness is another term for mindfulness. Wakefulness is the awareness that what you're here to learn is happening right now. It's happening right now. And then the other piece is like the Dharma is just arriving at a set of teachings that are enough for you. Like I'm not looking for a new set of teachings. I found a set of teachings between like Patanjali and the Buddha and 12 step. I found a set of teachings that have stood the test of time. I've kicked the tires on them. And so, I think an example of you hear a teaching and you've got to really not take it on faith. You've got to examine it and see if it's true for you. And there's a phrase, once you know something to be true, you must live up to it. So I'm trying to give like a precise example. I was taught that as you learn to forgive yourself, you learn how to forgive others. Fair enough. I was taught that. I was in a big room, 100 people there. A teacher says this. We go through some practices around self-forgiveness. That was a great thing to learn, to forgive myself for being imperfect, for making mistakes and being a learner in this lifetime. Those were good things to forgive myself for. But sure enough, if I can forgive myself for something, I can learn how to forgive someone else for something.
Mm.
And so you take a teaching and you see if it's true. And I've been blessed enough to have a set of teachings that I've seen to be true and I live by. And when I share them with others, they find them to be beneficial. And this is the Dharma. I think we're born and we rapidly kind of assimilate a bunch of beliefs, expectations, prejudices, fears, whatever they are, from those around us, and that becomes our Dharma. And my Dharma was pretty sketchy. It was like, like what I learned growing up, my role models were John Wayne and James Bond. That was my Dharma. Like they were not even living what they were. Like John Wayne was an actor, but I acted like what he was doing in those movies was somehow a plan for life.
Mm-hmm.
And so my Dharma led me to rehab, and then it was time for a new set of teachings. And so I think that's the other piece is one of the things Cale Sanderson, the coach from Penn State, says is focus on what you're learning today. Have a deep and abiding relationship with what you're learning today. And that's the Dharma. Like what aspect of the teachings that you're learning today are you focusing on? Are you bringing into your lived experience? Are you bringing into your your breath by breath, everyday moments, and learning how they support you. Like, what are you learning about life today?
Mm.
What truth are you exploring today? Focus on what you're learning today. This is the Dharma.
Thank you so much. I'm personally elevated in this discussion right now. I'm really reflecting on my own experience, and I'm like, wow, I think I better go spend a little more time with Rolf in the near future. That's what I'm thinking, actually. Um, Aside from me, you were a U.S. Army Ranger, and that comes with a culture. That comes with a set of principles and guidelines, and I'm guessing that some of that culture and some of those guidelines have been unbelievably helpful for you in your life, and some might have been challenging and needed to be worked out in some ways. I don't know. I'm guessing, but I'm wondering from the perspective of being a warrior, or a spiritual warrior, or as you are now, as you once told me a very powerful story about being when it was your time to leave the army, and your commanding officer, when you had said to him, I've been training with these guys, it doesn't feel comfortable for me to leave. And I think he said something to the effect of, well, you're going to fight in another theater of war now. You're going to do your life in another way. Could you speak to how, if you've transitioned out of the concept of warrior, or if that still very much is a powerful metaphor or archetype for you?
Well, I think what the military and specifically Ranger training did for me was hold out the possibility of finding yourself through service to others, to dedicating yourself to something larger than yourself, finding meaning in life by serving your community. And they did a marvelous job at getting young people to be enthusiastic about serving something meaningful. Now, what was supposed to happen next was combat. And so there's some real issues there for all involved, for everyone involved. The US military conducting operations is going to cause a lot of suffering. And so that part, there's no words for it. To call it regrettable is a vast understatement. That this thing that's so effective in delivering a sense of meaning and purpose to young people also is so destructive is just one of the great mysteries and tragedies of my life. However, what I was able to do is I graduated from Ranger School in 1988, and I was sober in 1990. And when I went to rehab, everything they had taught me I could use in terms of paying attention, learning, follow through, holding myself accountable to a standard, celebrating those who I am with, the people to my left and to my right, and befriending them and working with them. I learned so much about spiritual friendship, oddly, in the military. And how you don't really do this alone. You do this together. And there's something enormously dignified in winning together as opposed to winning as a separate self. And so all of these things are things that I learned, and once again were modeled for me. I feel as though I've been the beneficiary of just outstanding community and modeling. Just as I look back on my life, the military community and modeling, then 12-step community and modeling, then Kripalu community and modeling, then, Buddhist meditation community and modeling. And now I've come full circle. I'm back at Kripalu, and the people there, I have a role. I'm the director of the yoga school, but I'm working with, everyone I work with has 20, 30 years of experience, selfless service to others, studying and applying teachings. And so I have the example of just, when I think of the military, when I think of the yoga teachers, when I think of the Buddhist meditation teachers, I think of humans galvanized by the opportunity to be of service to others.
Hmm.
It's just a beautiful thing to see someone respond to that calling in much the same way you have, Tommy. So you know, with this
Hmm.
Recovery 2.0, you were
Hmm.
galvanized around the opportunity to lessen the suffering of others. Galvanized, galvanized by the opportunity to lessen the suffering of others, motivated one day at a time. And it's just a beautiful thing to see, but then to be lifted up by, you
Hmm.
know. And so that's in terms of like, what was the military for me? They were a home, you know, they were home, they were friends, they were teachers that made it possible for me to be available to other friends and homes and other teachers.
And you have worked with the military and shared this incredible wealth of practice and wisdom with our military, haven't you?
I have, I think the most direct was I ended up guiding a 200 hour on Camp Lejeune with the Marines
I
there.
did not know that.
Yeah, no, it's a long story. One of a person I ran who went to my 200 hour and 300 hour is the wife of they're called the Seabees. It's the Naval Engineer Corps, and so she was on Camp Lejeune's, and so her capstone project for her 300 hour was a 200 hour that she ran at Camp Lejeune that I mentored her through. And so we took a group of Marines to a 200 hour training.
How was their, I mean, generally, how was their experience? I mean, that must have been mind
They
blowing for
were
them.
fantastic. I think that there was, these people were on active duty. Some of them were deploying
Hmm.
to go cause harm on behalf of their country. And so there was a lot of conflict there. I learned a lot about when you're talking about people on active duty who are, these are people who are going out to enter combat, to kill others. That creates some dissonance. And so there was a lesson there. I don't know that I would teach people who are going to have to fight on behalf of their country nonviolent principles. It
Right.
just created too much dissonance.
Yes. Well, that
And
makes a
they
lot
were
of
fine
sense.
about it. They were willing to own it. They're like, hey, this is my life right now. I'm 24 years old and I'm a sniper and this is what I do. Maybe I'll do something else later, but this is what I'll do. And so there wasn't like a problem, but it made me, I would later be like, I don't want to cause someone to hesitate when they have to keep themselves alive.
Right. Of course.
Yeah.
What a complex world we live in.
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, we're coming to the top of our hour here already. I just was wondering if for the parents out there who are in recovery and for the children, all of us who have parents or had parents, could you speak a little bit about this journey, which began this, at least the meditative piece of it began, if I'm doing my math correctly, you have an 18-year-old daughter now.
So she's about to be 21
Oh
and
my
my
God.
son is about to be 18. Yeah.
Oh,
No, it took me a couple of years. I had to suffer for a couple of years as a parent before I took action.
okay.
But um, let's see. So
You raised two children.
yeah, and it continued to. My son
Yes.
is graduating from high school in about 4 weeks, and he's deciding where to go to college, and
Hmm.
that's a very kind of fraught decision.
Sure.
He's got some nice opportunities, and it's hard to know which one is the right one. My daughter is presently at Columbia,
Hmm.
and so things are fraught there.
Crazy.
Um, and yeah, we've been in communication with her throughout the last couple of weeks as those protests happen. Um, and I just think that parenting is one of the hardest journeys that, because our choices are impacting other human beings on a daily basis, and we're holding ourselves accountable to the effect of our choices while also learning as we go, you know?
Hmm.
And so that's a crucible, as much as teaching is difficult. I was coaching someone who was talking about like interacting with his 7-year-old, and that's just different than interacting with a student, you
Mm.
know? And so I think that this has been specifically, you can't really tease them apart. The yoga poses and the meditation kind of come together,
Yes.
provide someone, there's a phrase, there are no fools and there are no wise men. There's only the presence or the absence of inner space. And there's this idea of creating space within yourself for something new to grow. And so when brought my first child home and my second child home, all I had as a script for being a parent was what my parents showed me. And I didn't really want to be my parents to my children. And so how do I create a space for something new to happen? And how do I do so while holding myself in compassion?
Mm.
I was talking to this other person about, we need equal parts compassion, self-compassion, but also some equanimity. Our children need us to demonstrate some calm and some steadiness, and so there's
Yes.
the equanimity, but also we need to hold ourselves in compassion as we learn one day at a time how to be there for our children.
Incredible. Well, Rolf, I'm incredibly grateful. Thank you so much for sharing your time and your wisdom and your expertise and your love with the Life Beyond Addiction Conference here, the greater recovery community in the world. And thank you for your service at all levels. And I look forward to a time when we can see each other in 3 dimensions once again. I'll be looking for that. Maybe I'll come seek you out somewhere before you know it.
Well, it's been great to do. So this is our 10th call, right? Wow.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah,
Well,
man.
thank you for your friendship, Tommy, and for the work you do in the world.
Thank you, Rolf. So we've been completing these talks with the Recovery 2.0 prayer. So if I could ask everybody who's watching, if we could all just sit with our spine extended. And what I used to hear Rolf say, he used to say, allow the eyes to close and extend your spine, and notice as you extend the spine, your heart lifts. And we'll take an inhale together as a community. And this beautiful exhale. And I'll inhale and I'll just recite this little prayer. Universe, put us in the places you want us to be, with the people you want us to be with, doing the things you want us to do. Thank you for the joys and the challenges of our lives. Amen, Sat Nam, and Namaste.